This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All righty, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend that is Ira Winderman. And Ira, there was actually a Duncan Robinson sighting yesterday. That was nice watching that game yesterday. There were a lot of positives. Getting Lowry back, which was a sweet thing. Get a little more organization to the offense, which is always a difference with Lowry there. But it was nice to see that Duncan showed up, and it's kind of like what you say. When everything kind of settles down,
yes,
it's when he kind of works his best that the other cogs are in place for him to excel.
Yeah, he's a piece that fits on this team, not necessarily with the way other teams would play. The one thing I would like to see now, even out with Duncan Robinson, is more consistency. Is not the 1 of 6 and then the 4 of 7s. Is just provide a steady relief point for the rest of the guys. Don't go outside of your comfort zone, but a little bit more consistency. But that's what getting whole is all about, Big O, is it's establishing that consistency that you know your lineup, you know your reserves, and you know your roles. Duncan Robinson fits a role very well on this team, and he showed that now that Kyle Lowry was back last night.
That was nice to see him in the mix, man, because it just you could tell what a real point guard looks like, and you can tell when the offense isn't pieced from possession to possession, where you kind of, Spo is just working magic, trying to create offense and generate it with different people triggering that offense. I mean, I gotta imagine that half a roll of Tums was saved last night for Spo just because he has Lowry on the court.
Yeah, and we never got to that moment of truth last night. San Antonio was woefully shorthanded. 3 of their 5 starters were out. But with Kyle back, think of all the games when the Heat were right there at the end, when they were up, when there was a possession game, when you needed the right play at the right moment instead of Jimmy Butler forcing the jumper, instead of Tyler Hero forcing the turnover. That's what you're going to get. Kyle Lowry's here for the moments of truth. He didn't have a basket last night, and that didn't matter against that team. It will matter down the road, but it's really fourth quarter, Kyle. I don't want to say I want to see a close game. It's always easier just to win going away. But you have Charlotte coming up, for example, on Saturday. Looks like it should set up as a close game. That's when Kyle really will have his sort of homecoming and return, when in the moments of truth, where does he get the ball? How does he orchestrate the offense? God bless Gabe Vincent. God bless what they've been able to do to this point. But like you and I said, eventually there'll be go time. Usually it's after the trading deadline, February 10th. Usually it's even after the All-Star game, February 20th. Be whole by then, and you'll be fine. As it is, with all the trials and tribulations, they're mere percentage points behind Chicago for first place in the Eastern Conference.
By the way, you can follow Ira on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat. And the Miami Heat will be back in action tomorrow night, taking on Charlotte. Last night, they defeat the Spurs 112-95. You just mentioned the trading deadline. The team's pretty stacked. They're pretty deep overall, I got to say, when we're looking at it. But you never know. Sometimes there's some low-hanging fruit out there.
Absolutely.
And, Riley has been just an absolute kraken when it comes to taking advantage of certain situations over the last 25 years. Can the Kraken rise to take advantage of any disgruntled situations out there in the NBA?
Well, I look at the Heat and I say to myself, where might they need help? And the one question I still have is this. If PJ Tucker is injured or sidelined or in foul trouble, who steps in right there? And the answer at the start of the season was Markieff Morris, who only played 10 games. We haven't seen since November 8th. Otherwise, you're going undersized with Caleb Martin, who wasn't available last night. Matter of fact, last night they briefly went back to Dedmon and Adebayo. Eric Spoelstra sort of experimenting. So I'd say if there's a backup power forward, and that's the move they made at last year's deadline, remember, when they traded Harkless and Silva to Sacramento for Nemanja Bjelica. They thought it would work out. It certainly is working out well for the Golden State Warriors. It didn't necessarily here. And they made the move with Myers Leonard for Trevor Ariza. So it's kind of similar in that the Heat looked at power forward at last year's deadline and said, we can use some depth. Let's get a couple of guys. If there's a simple guy like that, the difference is this year, they don't have a Myers Leonard contract to trade. They don't have a deal like that for a bigger name guy on an expiring contract. I would look at power forward, but I'd also say this to you. We'll get into this again twice next week in our Acura Pembroke Pines reports, is this. I think the trading deadline will be more impactful to the Heat by what other teams do in the East, what the competition does. What does Philadelphia do with Simmons? Does Cleveland bring in another veteran guard now that they're still sort of questionable there with the injuries that they've had? So I think the trading deadline might be punch and counterpunch, where the Heat almost sit back and say, let's see what the other guys do, and then we'll know how much we need to do.
Tyler Hero yesterday, 24 points. Didn't shoot well from three-point range, but it's funny how a game where he didn't shoot well from three-point range, but he played a hell of a game. He did play a really, really good game.
Yeah, and again, if Max Strus and Duncan Robinson are hitting threes, which they did, Strus hit his first two when he came out there, it doesn't force Tyler to play outside of his comfort zone. You have your three-point shooters, you have your shot creators, which is what Tyler does. Tyler operates better inside the three-point arc. His streak of games with three-pointers came to an end last night. That's fine. That's not what he's here for. But if he can be inventive and creative with that second unit, when there's not as much scoring out there, that's what they need. So you saw that again last night. And again, I want to see that late game situation where Tyler not only doesn't have to force, but where Kyle Lowry can set him up in the best possible position.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of your point, this is also what we see the difference between Tyler and Duncan. That if Duncan's not hitting his threes, he's not nearly as productive for you overall because he doesn't have enough of variety in his game.
Oh, absolutely.
There's Tyler. Okay, not a great night for him from three, but every other part of his game is super solid. And so you overlook that and you say, kid had a hell of a game yesterday overall. The threes didn't matter. And it shows you what kind of a basketball player Tyler Hero is.
He's the three-level scorer that Eric Spoelstra talks about. He will hit the threes. He will hit the mid-range. He will get to the rim, which is what you want in that type of role as a sixth man. And that's why with all the Heat's machinations and lineups, they've really been careful to try to keep Tyler in that role. That's what he does best. He's their sixth man. You can make an argument. Eventually, he might wind up as one of the greatest Heat sixth men in history, whether you want to put Ray Allen or Dan Marley or Mike Miller in there. There have been a lot of good ones, but he's filling that role specifically. Now we'll see how far they go in the playoffs, how he handles that type of role. But again, we know he's done it once already against the Celtics, in the Eastern Conference playoffs a couple of years ago when they went to the finals. So there clearly is plenty that Tyler has already shown and more room for growth. I don't know, Big O, if it was a snub that he didn't make the All-Star game. Not a lot of six men do. That's just historical. I wrote a story about that in the Sun Sentinel. He fills his role. Maybe if there's an injured player or two, possibly. Probably Pascal Siakam is most likely as the first reserve to be picked by Adam Silver if they need someone. But just because he didn't make the All-Star game doesn't mean he's snubbed. He's 22. His time will come.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think next year, this was his breakout year. Like he had a breakout moment in the bubble. Now he's had his breakout year, and I think next year will be like, okay, now you've earned your stripes, kid. You've now, you're one of us, and I think that will happen next year for him. Now, the other storyline is, and I'm not hoping for it, but I'm hoping for it because I can't root against the Heat to lose or anything like that. But they got Washington and New Orleans after Charlotte, all winnable games. They do want to improve their road record, but in the process, Chicago's only percentage points ahead of Miami. So how does this whole thing end? What's the cutoff date? And is it the last game right before the All-Star game?
No, it's actually Sunday. It's actually coming this Sunday. So I just posted on Twitter. Basically, Chicago has 2 games left against Indiana and Philadelphia. If they win those 2, Billy Donovan's your All-Star coach. Spoelstra doesn't have to worry.
Ooh.
If the Heat win Saturday in Charlotte, remember, Charlotte's playing a back-to-back. They're playing at home tonight also, so they might be a little tired. If the Heat win that and Chicago splits their 2 games, Eric Spoelstra gets to go to the All-Star game with the higher percentage in the East. There's also a chance, even if the Heat lose, Chicago loses 2, Milwaukee loses 2, that Eric Spoelstra could wind up going. Basically, because of the odd number, Big O, because the Heat only have 1 game left, most of the other contenders have 2 games left. It's sort of make or break for Eric Spoelstra tomorrow. And he'd almost like to say, I'll take the win, but I'll defer it in the standings till after Sunday. And that's not how it works. So I would think Chicago probably beats Indiana. But again, Chicago's shorthanded. I think beating Philadelphia comes down to whether Joel Embiid plays against them or not. Philly should win that. Doc Rivers is not eligible to be coach. You can't coach consecutive years. Doc Rivers was the East coach last year, so Philly doesn't matter. Yeah, so Eric Spoelstra is in kind of a pickle right now. And I think there's a very good chance if they beat Charlotte that he will wind up as the Eastern Conference coach for the All-Star game on February 20th in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, so is there any truth? Because there's a rumor out there that Ross is offering Spo $200,000 to lose that Charlotte game tomorrow.
Actually, I think Spoelstra is offering each of his players $10,000 if they help him lose the game, because that's where the onus rests right here. The one thing about Eric also, I mean, there's talk about tanking. There's been so much obviously going on this week. And there clearly was a point one year when the Heat went to Philly and played all of their reserves for 48 minutes because they couldn't afford to win or else they lost a draft choice. But the Heat have played this mostly according to Hoyle. The Heat go for the best record. They deal with the worst seeding. If it's the Knicks 9 years in a row, so be it. That's how they play things. Eric Spoelstra is coaching for the win. He doesn't know any other way. Jimmy Butler doesn't know any other way but to play to win. Nor does Kyle Lowry. Nor does Bam Adebayo. You can't orchestrate it that way. You can't roll out 5 reserves. Not that Eric would at this point. And the bigger picture is this. You want the highest possible seed. You want to avoid the Clevelands and the tougher matchups in the first round. You want to take the Knicks or the fodder at the bottom of the Eastern Conference instead. So, yeah, they'll play the game to win. But he also might be Billy Donovan's biggest fan this week. So he might be sending some strategical tips to Billy. Here's how you beat the Pacers. Here's how you beat the Sixers. I think right now the Chicago Bulls have no bigger fan than one Eric Spoelstra.
Butler made the All-Star game. Should he go to the All-Star game? Because he's had so much mileage on him. He's had his share of injuries. He misses his share of time with the Heat. Rest. I would rather him rest, to be quite honest. How do you think he handles the All-Star break?
Well, Big O, again, it's a 7-day break. There's only 2 days of commitment to the All-Star game this year in recent years, Saturday and Sunday. So it's not like he can't get away and have his time. So many guys, as soon as the game's over, leave for the Players Association meeting in the Bahamas. So you'll have your time there, number one. Ego is a big thing. I think it's tough for a star to sit there and watch NBA TV and see these interviews and not be part of it. This means something to Jimmy Butler. And for all those who said, but he's missed 19 games, if ever there's been a season with missed time because of COVID, I think you accept that this is not typical and that missed games don't factor in as much. Jimmy will go. The league a few years ago adopted a policy. You better darn well show you're injured. And if you show you're injured, you might have to sit out the first game after the All-Star break, which for the Heat will be a game in New York. I don't think Jimmy wants to miss a trip to the Garden, so he'll go. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be a real injury or something that comes up in the interim, and I think you'll see a lot of that around the league. Guys sort of protecting themselves. Already, it looks like Kevin Durant will not participate because of his knee. Draymond Green went on TNT last night and said he's not going to be back in time. There will be commissioners' replacements that could open the door for Tyler, and there still is plenty of time to get yourself injured.
I hope he comes up with a phantom injury and he takes it off, because I think it's more important that he ends up resting. That would be actually nicer if he's able to rest. All right, what are you working on there at the Sun Sentinel so folks can check you out, my friend?
I'm actually working on my Sunday column. What I spoke about is I think how the East shakes out at the trading deadline will really open the window to where the Heat stand. If Philadelphia, which is only right there with the Miami Heat, 1 game behind, gets something tangible now for Ben Simmons, I think they vault right up to the top. If you throw a CJ McCollum there, don't think it'll be a Bradley Beal. Jaylen Brown would be awesome. If they add one more talent, they're probably as good as anyone if Joel Embiid can sustain this. Cleveland Cavaliers aren't going anywhere. A perfect name for them, I think, would be Goran Dragic after they lost Colin Sexton and Ricky Rubio was injured. So when you look down the East, Milwaukee, one more player. Do they feel they have to shake it up a little? I think the Heat are going to be sitting there. They play New Orleans on Thursday, day of the deadline, but they'll be seeing what else happens in the East because the top of the East right now is so close. Big I think it's like a game and a half for the top 5 teams that a little subtle move even could make a big difference. I think the Heat will consider something subtle. They just don't have the tradable contracts. Last year, they had the Olynyk contract in that range. The only contract, this is why we talk about it, is Duncan Robinson.
Right.
So it's a matter of, do you want to tinker with that chemistry right now, or do you want to ride what you have because you've only had Butler, Adebayo, Lowry together for 16 games, those three with Hero for 15 games, and just get it right. So I'm going to look at the East. I'm going to look at moves of other teams can make to vault the Heat, but it's going to be a real fight to the finish. I mean, I think we might be looking back and saying, man, if the Heat didn't lose to Detroit, if the Heat didn't have those bad home losses, it might be a lot like last year, except last year they were fighting for seeds 5, 6, 7. This year they could be fighting for a top seed going down, honestly, to the last game of the season in Orlando.
All right, so what's your gut tell you? I know you'll. There's a 99.9% chance you're going to be completely wrong on this because none of us really know. But what do you think happens with Simmons? Does he stay? And if he gets traded, what's the spot that is doable?
I think he stays because the ego of Daryl Morey, the GM in Philadelphia, is he has to play this to the finish now. That if he said he's going to get, to use Pat Riley's parlance, a whale, he damn well better get a whale, or else why did he wait so long and jeopardize his team in the first place? So, this is what Daryl Morey does. He collects draft choices. He waits for the moment. He makes his big moves. He pounces on players like a Harden or someone like that.
But how does Simmons gain any value as time goes on? That's the part I don't understand. If Simmons was playing and then playing at a high level, then value goes up because you're watching it. But we're talking about a petulant child that's on the sidelines, not playing, not showing you anything. I don't know. How does that gain value?
I think it gains value from this respect, Big O. If a team has such a bad season that they're desperate, in other words, Indiana is underachieving this year. Sacramento has gone in the toilet this year. That at season's end, they might say, we've got to do something. We've got to sort of throw the Hail Mary. We don't know if it's going to work if we trade one of our star players, but we're awful right now. Plus, in the offseason, you know where draft choices are. So Philly might know if something is a lottery pick, a quality lottery pick or not. It's easier to maneuver then. In the offseason, you can carry up to 20 players. You can do a 4-for-1 or 5-for-1 and not have to cut players. It is easier to trade in the offseason. I think that's the way that Daryl Morey is looking at it also. And I would be careful the other way, Big O. When you say that Ben Simmons' value is down in the offseason, I think he's such a unique talent. I think we can both agree on that. I think that's someone you have to work in during an offseason. To bring in someone that unique and going, okay, we have this unbelievable 6'10 defender, a playmaker who can't make a shot from anywhere. Okay, coach, come up with a new game plan and have it ready in 24 hours.
Right.
He's a hard, unique talent to fit in. I think that's what makes the offseason easier.
Follow him on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat. More importantly, catch his work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Ira, have a great weekend, my friend. We will catch up on Tuesday.
And I'm going to go buy Eric Spoelstra some winter clothes. Thank you, Big O.
You got it, poor man. God, coach that all-star game. Give him a break. All right, good stuff. There's Ira Winderman in our Acura Pembroke Pines Miami Heat report.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.